It had been weeks since Emma had felt anything close to affection for her husband, Tom. Their marriage, once full of warmth and affection, had slowly morphed into a strange series of routines, mechanical gestures, and unspoken resentments. The intimacy they once shared had faded, like an old photograph that had been exposed to too much sunlight. There were still moments when they sat together, but the silence between them grew thicker with every passing day. That evening, as the dim light of the living room flickered from a nearby lamp, Emma sat across from Tom. She studied him intently, his tired eyes scanning the newspaper, his hands tracing the lines of the page as if he were looking for something, anything, to keep him distracted. She couldn't stand it anymore. The indifference. The avoidance. The sense that he had stopped caring. "Tom," she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the quiet like a knife. He looked up, startled, as if he had forgotten she was there. His brow furrowed slightly, but he didn't speak. "I need to talk to you," she continued, her tone calculated. She wasn't angry yet, but the undercurrent of frustration in her voice was unmistakable. "About us. About this marriage." Tom lowered the newspaper and set it aside, meeting her gaze. "What's wrong, Emma?" She wasn't sure what was wrong. It was everything, really. The absence of warmth, the complete emotional disconnect. She needed control. She needed him to care. She needed him to want her. And she would make him want her, by any means necessary. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Emma said slowly, as if carefully choosing her words. "We've drifted apart, Tom. I know you've noticed it too. We're just going through the motions. And I'm not happy with it anymore." Tom nodded, as if acknowledging the truth of her statement, but said nothing. His silence only fueled her growing sense of powerlessness. "Do you even want me anymore?" she asked, her voice softer now, but with a venomous undertone. "Do you even care? Or am I just here?" Tom's expression softened, and he reached across the table, placing his hand gently over hers. "Of course, I care, Emma. I love you. I don't know what's happened between us. I'm trying, I really am." Emma recoiled slightly, pulling her hand back from his. Love. It had become such an empty word between them. She wanted more than love. She wanted passion, fire, desire. But Tom wasn't giving her that. He was giving her nothing. And it was killing her. "You say you're trying," Emma said, her voice gaining an edge. "But your trying isn't enough anymore. It's like we're roommates, not a married couple. And I'm done pretending like it's okay." Tom blinked, clearly taken aback by the intensity in her voice. He opened his mouth to speak, but Emma cut him off. "I've been patient," she continued, her tone now laced with authority. "I've waited for you to come around. But I'm tired, Tom. I need more. If you want this marriage to survive, you'll have to show me that you care. And I mean really show me, not just say it." Tom opened his mouth again, but the words seemed to get stuck in his throat. He looked at her, then away, clearly conflicted. He wanted to fix things, but Emma's demand felt too harsh, too final. "You don't get it, do you?" she asked, her voice rising. "I'm telling you, I need you to obey me. If you really want this marriage to work, you'll have to make some changes. And if you can't, then there's no point in pretending anymore." Tom recoiled slightly, as if the weight of her words had physically struck him. His eyes widened in disbelief, and for a moment, he seemed lost for words. "Obey you?" he repeated, almost incredulously. "Emma, what do you mean by that?" "I mean exactly what I said," Emma replied coldly, her gaze hardening. You'll have to do what I ask, when I ask it. No questions, no hesitation. Otherwise, this marriage is over. Tom opened his mouth to protest, but then closed it, his thoughts racing. He loved Emma. He had always tried to be the perfect husband, always put her needs above his own. But this was different. This was an ultimatum. Emma could see the hesitation in his eyes, the conflict. It was exactly what she needed. She had him on the edge. She had power again. Think about it, Tom, she said softly, her voice now a mix of persuasion and finality. You don't want to lose me. I know you don't. But if you keep acting like this, if you keep holding back, then we might as well call it quits. Tom didn't speak immediately. His hand trembled slightly as he ran it through his hair, the pressure mounting in the silence. Emma could see the cogs turning in his mind, the struggle within him. I just don't understand, he finally said, his voice quieter now, more vulnerable. Why does it have to be this way? Why do you have to control everything? Emma stood up, moving closer to him, her voice low and forceful. Because I need to feel desired again, Tom. And if I have to make you choose between me and your pride, I will. If you want intimacy, if you want this marriage, then you will do what I say. If not, then we're done. She left him sitting there, speechless, the weight of her words hanging in the air like an unspoken promise. She had made her point. And she knew exactly what would happen next. Tom had always been the devoted husband, always willing to give everything for her. But she had just pushed him to a breaking point, and he would have to choose. Would he obey? Or would he choose to walk away from the only woman he had ever loved? And as the evening drew to a close, Emma felt a strange sense of satisfaction. She had made him choose. And now, the true test of their marriage had begun. The days that followed Emma's ultimatum were nothing short of tense. Tom had become distant, almost like a stranger in his own home. The warmth between them had turned to cold silence, and the distance seemed to stretch with each passing hour. Emma, however, had never been one to shy away from control, and she wasn't about to let go of the power she'd seized. Every interaction, every glance, was now carefully calculated. She watched him, studied him, waiting for him to crack. But he didn't. Not yet. It was late afternoon when she finally decided to confront him again. She had given him enough time to reflect, to digest her words, to decide. But the quiet, the growing distance, was eating away at her. She couldn't wait any longer. Tom was in the study, sitting at the desk, his hands on the keyboard of his laptop. His face was drawn with concentration, and for a moment, he looked almost normal, like the man she had married. But then she saw it, the same hesitation, the same reluctance to engage. She didn't like it. It made her feel small, invisible, like she was nothing more than a shadow in his life. Emma entered the room without knocking, the door creaking behind her. Tom didn't immediately look up, but he must have sensed her presence because his shoulders tensed. He exhaled slowly, keeping his eyes trained on the screen in front of him. I need to talk to you, Emma said, her voice firm but laced with a quiet urgency. Tom didn't respond. He didn't even look at her. Tom, she repeated, louder this time, her voice carrying a sharper edge. You're not going to ignore me forever. Finally, he looked up. His eyes were tired, sunken, and there was a flicker of something, frustration, maybe, or resignation. But there was no anger. No fire. Just the same quiet acceptance he had shown for the past few days. I'm not ignoring you, he said softly, his voice flat. I've been thinking about what you said, Emma. Have you? She asked, stepping closer, her gaze never leaving his. "And what have you decided?" Tom hesitated. He rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand, as if he were trying to process everything that had happened, but Emma wasn't interested in his doubts anymore. She had made her demands, and it was time for him to follow through. "I don't know what you want from me," he finally admitted, his voice low. "You've given me an ultimatum, but it feels wrong. It feels like I'm not enough anymore." Emma felt a flicker of something, regret, maybe, but she quickly pushed it down. She couldn't afford to let her emotions get in the way now. "You are enough, Tom," she said, her voice smooth and cold, "but you're not giving me what I need. You're not showing me that you want this. You're not making me feel like I matter." Tom looked at her, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to understand what she truly wanted. Emma stood her ground, waiting, watching him, her expression unwavering. He seemed to shrink under her gaze, a man caught between two worlds. She knew he loved her. She knew he wanted to fix things. But she also knew he didn't fully understand the weight of her demands. "I need control," she said suddenly, her voice sharper, more assertive than before. "I need to know that you'll do what I say, when I say it. I need you to choose me over your own ego, over your pride. I need you to submit to me, Tom." Tom looked taken aback. The word submit seemed to hang in the air like a heavy cloud, and for a moment Emma thought he might actually walk away. But he didn't. Instead, he sighed and stood up from the desk, running his fingers through his hair. "I don't know if I can do that," he said quietly, almost as if he were speaking to himself. Emma felt a flicker of satisfaction. He was close now, so close. But she couldn't let him off the hook just yet. She needed to see him break. She needed to feel his submission, to know that he was willing to surrender himself to her completely. "You will," she said, her voice dripping with certainty. "You don't have a choice. You either obey me, or we're done. There's no middle ground, Tom." His gaze flickered, and for a moment, he seemed to lose himself in the quiet tension between them. His lips parted, as if he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. He took a step closer to her, and Emma could feel the change in the air. It was like the space between them had suddenly become charged with electricity. "Why does it have to be this way?" he asked, his voice strained. "Why can't we just love each other again? Why can't we fix this without all the games?" Emma could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface now, but she kept it in check. "Because love isn't enough anymore, Tom," she said, her voice cold and unwavering. "You stopped giving me what I need, and now I have to take control. I have to make you understand what's at stake." Tom's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment Emma saw the vulnerability there. He was afraid of losing her, afraid of the life they had built together crumbling to dust. She could see it in his face, the fear, the confusion. He didn't want to give in. But she knew, deep down, that he would. "Do you want me, Tom?" she asked suddenly, her voice softer now, almost seductive. "Do you still desire me?" He froze, his eyes locked on hers. There was hesitation in them, but something else too. Something raw. Something real. "Of course, I do," he whispered. Emma smiled. "Then prove it." Tom's shoulders slumped, the last of his resistance fading. He took a deep breath, and Emma could see the shift in him. The fight was gone. He was defeated, broken. He had chosen to obey. "I'll do whatever you want," he said, his voice barely audible. Emma stepped closer, her heart racing with the power she now held. "Good," she said, her voice low and commanding. "We'll see how far you're willing to go." And with that, the game had begun. The days after Emma's ultimatum felt like a fog, a haze of uncertainty and raw emotion. Tom's obedience was now a reality, and the power dynamics in their home had shifted in a way that neither of them could have anticipated. Emma watched with a mix of satisfaction and unease as her husband moved through their life, his actions more mechanical than heartfelt, his responses measured, almost cautious. He was afraid to make a wrong move, to do anything that might upset her, and yet Emma found herself wondering if this was what she truly wanted. For the first time in their marriage, there was no real connection between them. There was obedience, yes, but there was no warmth, no intimacy, no genuine affection. She had pushed him so far into submission that the very thing she craved, the respect and adoration, had turned into something that felt hollow. Emma, for all her control, had not anticipated this emptiness. She didn't realize how much she had relied on the emotional closeness, the give and take of love that had once defined their relationship. She had demanded more, and now all she had was this cold compliance. It was late afternoon again, and the silence between them had become almost unbearable. Tom was sitting in the living room, his head down, eyes on his phone, his back hunched slightly as if he were trying to make himself invisible. Emma couldn't remember the last time they had a meaningful conversation, the last time they had shared a laugh, or even just a quiet moment of connection. Everything now revolved around her commands, his responses, and the ever-present tension that seemed to hang over them like a storm cloud. She watched him from the doorway for a moment, studying the back of his head, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped his phone as though it were the only thing tethering him to reality. For all the power she had over him, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing him. She wasn't sure what had gone wrong. She had wanted control, she had wanted to feel desired and powerful, but she hadn't expected this cold, detached version of her husband to be the price she would have to pay. "Tom," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. He didn't respond at first, and Emma felt a flicker of annoyance. But she pressed on. "Look at me." He lowered his phone and looked up slowly, his eyes tired, a little resigned. "Yes, Emma? I need you to talk to me," she said, walking into the room and standing in front of him. She couldn't remember the last time she had truly asked for his thoughts, his feelings. It had always been about what she wanted, what she needed. Now, standing there in front of him, she realized how little she truly knew about him anymore. Tom's gaze shifted, and for a moment Emma saw something in the way he looked at her that made her feel as though she were a stranger in her own home. He didn't seem angry, didn't seem resentful, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes, a sadness that she couldn't ignore. "I'm not sure what you want from me anymore, Emma," he said quietly. His voice was almost empty, the words coming out like a sigh. "I've been doing everything you've asked, but I don't know if it's enough. It's not the same anymore." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had expected obedience, expected compliance, but she hadn't expected this, a man who was quietly unraveling, a man who had lost himself in the process. For a brief moment, she felt something stir inside her, a pang of regret, a feeling she couldn't quite place. "I know it's not the same," she said, her voice quieter now. "I don't know what I was thinking, Tom. I wanted control. I wanted to feel like you cared, like you would do anything for me." Tom stood up slowly, his movements hesitant, as though unsure of what to do next. He didn't seem angry, but there was a quiet intensity in the way he looked at her, a kind of pain that Emma had never truly understood until now. "You don't have to keep doing this, Emma," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to control everything. I love you. But I don't know if I can keep living like this." The words hit Emma harder than she expected. She had spent so much time manipulating, so much time controlling, that she had forgotten what it felt like to just love, to be loved. In her quest for power, she had pushed Tom away, and now it seemed like it was too late to turn back. I don't want to lose you, she whispered, the words escaping her lips before she could stop them. She had been so focused on getting what she wanted that she hadn't realized how much she depended on him, on their bond. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about love, about the connection they had once shared. Tom's face softened slightly, and he took a step toward her. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, as if he were afraid she might pull away. Emma didn't move. She just stood there, feeling the weight of her own vulnerability for the first time in a long while. I don't know if we can go back to what we had, Tom said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. But maybe we can try. Maybe we can start over, without the power struggles, without the games. For a moment, Emma felt like she was waking up from a dream, like she was seeing her husband in a new light. She hadn't realized how much she had taken from him until now, how much she had demanded without ever considering what he needed. I want that too, she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. I want us to find a way back to each other. To be real again. And in that moment, for the first time in weeks, Emma felt the weight lift from her shoulders. She had learned the hard way that control was not the answer, that love couldn't be forced or manipulated. It had to come naturally, from both sides. She wasn't perfect, and neither was Tom. But together, maybe they could rebuild what had been broken. As Tom reached for her, pulling her into his arms, Emma realized that this was the beginning of something new, a chance to find balance, to find love again, without the power struggles that had nearly torn them apart. It wouldn't be easy, but they would figure it out together. Because, in the end, love was stronger than control.